Yeah, so let's continue. Let's begin on today's lesson. Yeah, so cardiovascular diseases. So basically, I want us to discuss cardiovascular diseases in details, and I really want you to understand how these diseases develop, how these diseases develop, and now we will also discuss the nutrition management very fast on brief. Yeah, so I want us to take around 20 minutes in this Zoom, hoping you have stable internet. Yeah, so let's continue. So cardiovascular diseases, like I've been trying to explain, these are basically the diseases that affect the cardiovascular system. The CVDs. CVDs are basically the diseases affecting the cardiovascular system. And in the cardiovascular system, this is where we have the blood vessels, heart, and the blood. So in this case, it includes all the diseases, including even the cancer. But the cancer bit of it, we will discuss it later on diet therapy 3 in your module 3. Yeah, so here it is just discussing the diseases themselves that can affect the cardiovascular system. So here you find that most of the cardiovascular diseases, they start as a result of the blockage either in the arteries, mostly in the arteries. So in this case, if there is a blockage in an artery needs to supply blood to different organs. Even the heart itself needs blood for it to continue operating. So you find that the heart muscles always need to be supplied with the blood. So if in case there is a problem in the blood vessels that are supplying the blood to the heart, you find that the heart itself starts to, as in the function starts to deteriorate further. So in this case, we have several terms that you need to understand here. We have the atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. This involves the narrowing of the blood vessels that oxygenate heart muscles by building up of plaque, the lessons in the blood vessels. So a plaque is basically, we have an accumulation of, it can be the blood clots, it can be even the fats accumulating in the blood vessels. Like we talk of a high fat diet is not good for your health, because it can even accumulate in our blood vessels. And when they accumulate, so in this case, they attract more tissues to form this plaque. This plaque is an accumulation of very many tissues. It can be fat, calcium deposits, the blood clots, and so on. So they build up in the blood vessels, thereby narrowing it. So this plaque leads to the formation of a condition known as atherosclerosis. Hoping you can be able to see it. We will discuss them later. And after atherosclerosis is already there, now it means the heart itself can suffer from, for example, heart attack. Heart attack is whereby you find that the heart muscles are not able to get enough oxygen, simply because the blood vessels that are supplying blood to the heart may be blocked, or may have ruptured. So in this case, you find that this leads to development of many diseases, either in the heart. Also remember, when the blood vessel has narrowed, it increases the blood pressure. So that leads to development of hypertension. And many other diseases. We'll be able to discuss one after the other, and you'll see how they are able to form. Yeah. So in this case, we also have another term, atheroma. So atheroma now, this is a protective fibrin layer that forms between the fat deposit and the artery lining. So it is forming on the artery lining. The atheroma can rupture or break off, forming a thrombus, a blood clot, where they attract blood platelets and activate the clotting system in the body. So this response can result in the blockage and restrict blood flow. So you see, if there is restricted blood flow, it means there is that organ. Let's say if it's the heart, it's not able to get oxygen, it's not able to get nutrients. Remember, these are things that are carried in the blood. So if an artery is blocked, it means that the body, that organ is not able to get those nutrients and the oxygen and many other factors that are supposed to be supplied by the blood. So it means if there is no oxygen, that organ the functions will start to, as in the function, it won't function properly. Meaning that organ will start to develop some some diseases. Yeah, so we will be able to discuss all this. So all that explanation, it is summarized on this diagram. You see this diagram now. So here we have the lumen. Remember, lumen is the inner part of the artery. So these are the linings. The red part is the lining of the artery. Then the lumen is where the blood is supposed to be flowing in the arteries. So you see, number one here, we have a fatty stick. You see, the fat is accumulating on the lumen of the artery. And then number two, we have fibrous plaque. So it is accumulating, as in that fatty stick, it attracts more materials, forming a plaque. Then number three, we have advanced plaque. You see the space that is only remaining. So this blood vessel, this artery has greatly narrowed. It is very narrow to an extent that only the blood is left with only a small space. And this can end up blocking completely. So this is now the example we are talking about. It starts with just a stick, then it continue accumulating to a point whereby it can cause a blockage. You see here we are talking about, this is a diagram of a heart, and we're talking here it is labeled an infarction. An infarction, it's somewhere without oxygen, as in the blood tissues, no, the tissues of that heart, the tissues here, they have died, in short, because there is no oxygen. You know, if there is no oxygen, that part begins to die. Even if it is any part of the body, if there is no oxygen, if there is no blood, it will die. And this is as a result of this plaque. Hoping that can be well understood. So here we have another condition, dyslipidemia. Dyslipidemia refers to the blood lipid profile that increases the risk of developing atherosclerosis. So dyslipidemia, it shows that you have high lipid, or there is accumulation of lipid in the blood. So in this case, if there are high blood lipids, it means that the fat can be able to be deposited in the blood vessels. You have to understand that. And if it is deposited, you know, like we have said in this diagram, if it is deposited on an area in the blood vessels, it leads to accumulation of very many waste or very many materials, forming a plaque. Yeah, so in that case, when a person is having a high lipid profile, they are at risk of cardiovascular diseases. We'll discuss that in details. So we move on to general risk factors for cardiovascular diseases. The general risk factors. So what do we mean by that? In this case, we have two types of the risk factors. We have the non-modifiable and modifiable risk factors. The non-modifiable risk factor, Ferdosa, these are the factors that you cannot change. These are factors that you cannot change at all. Modifiable risk factors, they can be able to be altered, and a person can be able to improve, or the risk, that person can be able to prevent him or herself from getting that disease. That is the cardiovascular diseases. But non-modifiable cannot be changed. And in this case, the non-modifiable factors, they include age, gender, genetic factors, and race. So the age of a person can predispose him or her he or she to the cardiovascular diseases. So in this case, we talk about the old age. As a person is growing old, they're at risk of developing cardiovascular diseases. For example, hypertension. Gender, you find that in this case, you may find that females are more exposed to cardiovascular diseases due to the high body fat. Genetic factors, the family history. Maybe if in a person's family there is someone who is suffering from this cardiovascular disease, it means that these factors, they are flowing in their genes, and they're at risk of developing. Race also, whether you're black or white, you may find that some of them, they are more predisposed. Yeah. Then the modifiable risk factors now. So okay, before that, the high blood pressure, you find that the normal blood pressure is supposed to be between 120 and 139. So okay, we will discuss more on that, about high blood pressure. So before that, let's first discuss the the modifiable risk factors. Modifiable risk factors, one of them is high salt diet, high salt intake, as in a person who is consuming food that is high in salt. Mostly, in this case, you find that mostly processed food, the fast food, they are very high in salt, because salt is mostly used as a preservatives in processed food. So if a person is usually consume such foods, mostly in most of the cases, that put them at risk of cardiovascular diseases. Then another one is high blood cholesterol. If a person, like, you go to the hospital, you are tested for the level of the cholesterol, and then it is high, that shows that that person is at risk of cardiovascular diseases. And in this case, these are things that can be prevented. Like, if a person level of blood cholesterol are high, as a nutritionist, there are measures in which you can be able to talk to this person, and they're able to reduce the intake of cholesterol. So there are two types of cholesterol, that is the dietary cholesterol contained in the food, and blood or plasma cholesterol that is essential from the body metabolism. Yeah, you find that cholesterol is very important in the body, as it assists in the formation of things like hormones, the steroid like estrogen. Without cholesterol, you cannot have that hormone. So it's not okay. The problem is when a person take excess level of cholesterol. So excess cholesterol causes arteriosclerosis, that is the narrowing and the hardening of the artery due to the deposits of cholesterol, and increases the risk of heart attack. Heart attack is also referred to as myocardial infarction. Like I said, an infarction, there is noises. An infection is somewhere without blood, as in somewhere the tissues are starting to die or they're not functioning. Then also stroke. Stroke is another thing that can be caused by the blockage of the arteries, the narrowing and hardening of the arteries. So the amount of cholesterol in the diet is not reflected by the amount of in the blood. This is mostly determined by the amount of saturated fatty acids in the diet. The more you take the saturated fat, if you can remember, we have saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. And the saturated fats, they can only be found in the solid fat and the animal fat. So in this case, saturated fat, they increase the level of cholesterol in the body. As in, these are the main source of cholesterol. Unsaturated, they are the liquid fat, if you can remember from the principles of human nutrition. So the unsaturated fat, these are the liquid, and they don't have high level of cholesterol. So this is why we talk of, when you're choosing the source of fat, you need to choose it wisely. Then the other risk factor is too much fat, that is the saturated fatty acids, and the trans unsaturated fatty acids. So this increases the harmful cholesterol, the LDL, low density lipoprotein. Hoping you can understand these terms, because these terms you must understand them. The low density lipoprotein and so on, high density lipoprotein. So in this case, we talk of harmful cholesterol being the LDL, but the good cholesterol, they are the HDL. LDL, they are harmful because the low density lipoprotein are harmful because they transport cholesterol throughout the body. But the high density lipoprotein are good cholesterol, as in because the high density lipoprotein, they transport cholesterol from the blood back to the heart, or back to the liver, where it's supposed to be excreted or used for different purposes. Yeah. So when you take food that is high in saturated fat, the trans unsaturated fatty acids, that increases the level of cholesterol. Then we have high level of low density lipoprotein. So like I've said, the high level of low density lipoprotein, cholesterol, that's a sign that you're at risk of cardiovascular diseases. Then smoking cigarettes, this is another risk factor. So this produces nicotine, which stimulates the production of certain body chemicals. This chemical raises the pulse rate, blood pressure, and forces the heart contraction. So smoking also makes the heart need more oxygen at the same time, reduces the amount of oxygen available. So in this case, it means that smoking, as in smoking cigarette, it's a risk factor for cardiovascular diseases. Also, alcohol, it's another risk factor. And then we have obesity. A person who is obese, being obese puts you at risk of getting cardiovascular diseases. This is because obesity is as a result of accumulation of body fat in their adipose tissues. So it means they have a lot of fat circulating in their blood. Then another factor is reduced physical activity. This makes the energy from the food not to be expended, thus leading to the increase in the body fat. Because when you take food that is rich in energy, like let's say carbohydrate, excess of it can be stored as fat. So if you exercise, you are helping your body to spend more energy. Thus, you reduce the amount of food the amount of let's say carbohydrate that can be stored as fat. Then stress, that is another factor. While stress can affect all the body organs and functions of the body, its effects tend to be concentrated on the heart and the cardiovascular system, which is obliged to work hard, as in you make your body to, like if it's the pumping of blood, it's a bit high. Yeah, so hoping you have understood that. Those were the risk factors, the modifiable risk factor. Ensure that you can differentiate between the two: modifiable risk factor and non-modifiable. Modifiable, there are things that you can change, like reduced physical activity. You can tell someone to start exercising. Obesity, you can manage the weight of a person. Alcohol, someone can reduce it. Cigarette, you see, fats, and so on. And then how the prevention and nutrition management of cardiovascular diseases. This is the last thing that I want us to discuss. So in this case, you find that cardiovascular diseases can be nutritionally be managed. This is in general, by the way. We will go into specific diseases next week. For example, we discussed the management of hypertension, but you will borrow basically from this, as it will be more explanation of this. So once you understand the general way of managing CVDs, you're good to go. So one is to reduce the salt intake. Actually, I won't even discuss this in detail because we have already said high salt, remember, high salt intake increases the level of sodium in the body because salt is the main source of sodium. So reduced sodium intake can prevent CVD in a person at risk of facilitated CVD control in old age person or on medication. So sodium should be limited. To achieve this, choose food that is low in sodium and limit the amount of salt added to food. So you reduce, the way sodium can be reduced here is to reduce the salt intake and reducing the sodium, reducing the intake of processed food or adding salt in the food. Another way is consumption of diet that include a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. One thing about fruits and vegetables is that fruits and vegetables, they don't have fat. They don't have fat basically. And also even vegetables, they are high in fiber, and this fiber helps to eliminate the excess fat in our diet. So in this case, when you take a food that is rich in fruits and vegetables, it means you are safer than a person who is not taking food that is rich in this. Because even when you're managing the weight of a person, they're supposed to be eating a high fiber diet, and a high fiber diet is mostly found in vegetables. And then another way is dietary pattern high in grain product, especially the whole grain. So again, here you're trying to increase the fiber and you reduce on the fat intake. And then diet high in fiber, that one I've already explained. Consumption of diet that is lower in LDL, that is the low density lipoprotein, the harmful cholesterol. So in this case, it means that a person is supposed to be choosing unsaturated fat unlike the saturated fat. So there is examples given there. Ensure that you read very well and understand. So lastly, very briefly, we have the micronutrients and cardiovascular diseases. So in this case, you find that these micronutrients, they are very, very helpful in the management of CVDs. For example, magnesium. High consumption of magnesium reduces the production of this compound referred to as prostacyclin, which is a vasodilator, and increases the release of thromboxane, which is a vasoconstrictor. As in, this helps in the management of the blood pressure in the body. That is magnesium. And you know, if the blood pressure is controlled, it means that a person is not not at risk of cardiovascular diseases. Then we have another one. So in this case, you're supposed to be advising someone to take food that is rich in this source, as in high food that is rich in magnesium. And there are examples given there. You can read on your own. For example, pumpkin, and so many other soy. We also have spinach and so on. Green leafy vegetables. You can read that on your own. Then potassium. Potassium is another micronutrient that really help in the management of cardiovascular diseases. And in this case, you find that the most rich source of potassium is bananas. If you don't know, banana, the pumpkin seeds, we have the avocado, spinach. These are very good source of potassium. So potassium as well help in the excretion of sodium. You know, sodium is supposed to be avoided when a person is suffering from cardiovascular diseases, because sodium tends to increase the blood pressure or even worsen the condition. So in this case, when you're discussing these micronutrients, ensure that you always don't include sodium here. Don't include sodium as a micronutrient that is necessary in the management of CVD. So also we have vitamin C and calcium. So those are the key micronutrients. Those are the key micronutrients that are very, very helpful in the management of cardiovascular diseases. So you can read more on the physical activity and how it can help to manage cardiovascular diseases. And about obesity, we will discuss more on the weight management, of which it was discussed in the diet therapy one. So in this case, when you're managing cardiovascular diseases, you have to manage the overweight cases, because being overweight or obese, it's a risk factor. Yeah. So from the next lesson, we will discuss these diseases individually, starting from the atherosclerosis, which is a condition that leads to the other diseases. So that's it for today. Firdosa, do you have a question? Hello, Firdosa?
No, madam.
So have you tried to understood?
Yes.
Have you summarized all the notes up to that point? Because all the notes are on your dashboard.
Yeah. And you don't summarize up to that point.
You have summarized up to that point, eh?
Yeah, that point.
Okay, so next week we will continue with these diseases into detail and how, as a nutritionist, you can be able to manage them. So I hope that in case any question crop up, ensure that you ask. Don't be left out on any part. Also, I will upload a case study on the CVD, and you will answer those questions and submit. Yeah. Otherwise, have a good day. Thank you for attending the lesson.
Thanks.